Hello, everyone. I never thought I'd end up here, but it seems like this is the only place where I can vent and get some kind of reasonable reaction from people who aren't involved in my family. I know this post is going to be long, so I apologize in advance. But there's no other way to explain the situation. My parents passed away, first my father, then my mother. It happened within a year and I'm still struggling to accept it. But what came out after their deaths was even harder. All their property, the house, savings, even a small cottage on the outskirts of Bavaria, was willed to my cousin. And I, their only son, was left with nothing. Yeah, I know how it sounds. The guy's complaining because he didn't get the money. But it's not about the money. It's about the fact that my whole life I tried to earn their recognition, their love, their trust. And in the end, it all went to someone else, not me. To make it clearer, I'll start from the beginning. I was born in a small German town near Munich. An ordinary middle-class family. Dad Karl worked as an electrician on construction sites. Mom Maria was a nurse at the local clinic. They both grew up in the countryside, moved to the city for work, and spent their lives grinding away to build a house, buy a car, and give me an education. We weren't rich, but we didn't consider ourselves poor either. In the summers, we'd go to the Baltic Sea, and a couple of times we vacationed in Austria. The house always smelled like baking. Mom loved making strudels and apple pies. Dad loved tinkering. We had a shed in the yard where he'd spend hours messing around with tools. I was a quiet kid. I preferred reading and staying home over kicking a ball around outside. My parents often said I was too serious for my age. I thought they accepted me as I was. But everything changed when my cousin Daniel came into our lives. Daniel was the son of my father's sister, Elsa. Her marriage fell apart when Daniel was only 5. His father moved off to Switzerland somewhere and never had any involvement in his life after that. Elsa worked as an accountant, always staying late, so she often left her son with us. I remember the first time I saw him at our house. He was about 7, I was 8. He stood in the middle of our living room with a huge backpack in a bright green jacket, grinning from ear to ear. From day one, he knew how to charm adults. He'd say thank you for every little thing, praise Mom's pies, and admire Dad's tools. Me, on the other hand, I was quiet and shy. I'd watch my parents light up from his smiles, and I'd feel this weird burning inside. He was just a guest at first, but gradually he became almost a member of the family. We went to the same school, sat at the same table, often did homework together. But there was always this invisible competition between us. He was charismatic, energetic, loved sports, and made friends easily. I stayed the quiet nerd. One incident sticks in my mind. I was about 12, Daniel 11. We were playing soccer in the yard with the neighborhood kids. I accidentally scored a goal, and for the first time I felt like I could be the center of attention. But before I could even celebrate, Daniel ran up to Dad and exclaimed, "Did you see that shot I made?" And you know what? Dad praised him, not me him. I kept quiet then, but inside everything shattered. That was the first time I thought, maybe I really am worse. Over the years, episodes like that just piled up. At Christmas, my parents would buy me books, but for Daniel, new sneakers or sports gadgets. It seemed like they tried harder to please him than me. I tried talking to Mom about it more than once, but she always said the same thing. You know we love you the most. It's just harder for Daniel, he doesn't have a father. And I'd shut up, because I didn't want to seem selfish. When I turned 18, I got into university in Berlin. My parents helped with tuition, but I covered most of the expenses myself, worked as a waiter, then got a job at the library. I lived in a small rented apartment and only came home for holidays. Daniel tried university too, but dropped out after a year. He was always looking for easy ways, selling used phones, trying to start an online store, working at a car dealership but quitting quickly. My parents always said, "He's just finding himself." And I'd quietly seethe inside. I was finding myself too, but I was grinding and taking responsibility for my life at the same time. Over time, I noticed Daniel spending more and more time with my parents. He'd help Dad around the house, drive Mom to the stores, have dinner with them almost every night. When I'd come home, it felt like he was their son, and I was some distant relative stopping by. A few years ago, Mom got seriously ill. At first, we thought it was just a minor thing, but the diagnosis was much worse. Regular trips to the clinic, tests, treatments. I was working in Berlin then, juggling 2 jobs to pay off my mortgage and student loans. I'd come when I could, but it wasn't enough. But Daniel, oddly enough, was there. He'd drive Mom to doctors, stay with her at home, help with shopping. I can't deny it. I was grateful to him then. It seemed like he really showed his best side. I even felt ashamed for being so jealous of him before. But at the same time, I noticed my parents getting even closer to him. Dad called him a real helper, Mom, our support. And I felt out of place again. A year ago, Dad was gone. Heart attack. It happened suddenly. The evening before, he was fixing the kitchen faucet. In the morning, Mom found him unconscious. I came as soon as I heard, but I didn't make it in time. A few months later, Mom passed too. She seemed to break after Dad's death. Her illness progressed quickly, and no treatment helped anymore. I buried both parents, and I was sure that now it was my duty to preserve their memory, take care of the house, continue their traditions. But then came the day the will was read. A few weeks after the funeral, I was still living in a fog. Every morning I'd wake up and forget for a second that my parents were gone. Then reality would hit, and I'd sink back into that emptiness. The only thing that required my involvement was handling the inheritance. My parents weren't millionaires, but they had a 2-story house in the Munich suburbs, a small plot of land in Upper Bavaria, savings in the bank, and of course things, furniture, Dad's tool collection. All of it should have gone to me. At least, that's what I thought. The notary they'd worked with for years invited us to a meeting. He insisted that all close relatives be present. That already seemed odd, but I didn't think much of it. That day I arrived early. The notary's office was in an old building in central Munich. Narrow hallway, smell of coffee and paper, heavy wooden door with a brass plaque. When I walked in, Aunt Elsa and Daniel were already there. He was in an expensive gray suit, with a groomed beard and watches that clearly cost more than my monthly salary. I was even surprised. Where did he get the money for that look? Last I heard, he'd shut down his used car business again. We nodded at each other. I didn't sit next to them. I chose a chair across. The atmosphere was tense, like we were all waiting for the climax of some play. Finally, the notary entered, Mr. Weiss, a lean man in his 60s with gray temples. He greeted us, sat at the massive desk, and opened a folder of papers. "Thank you for coming. Today we'll read the will of your parents, Carl and Maria. I want to note, they drew it up in advance and everything was done legally." I felt my fists clench. Part of me was worried there might be some nuances, but overall I was sure all the property would go to me. That's how it should be. I'm their only child. Mr. Weiss started reading the text. His voice was monotonous, but every word hit me like a hammer to the head. "We, Carl and Maria, of sound mind and firm memory, draw up this will. Our property, including the house in Munich, the plot in Upper Bavaria, bank accounts, and other assets, we bequeathed to our nephew Daniel. I stopped breathing. I didn't even understand the meaning at first. "Excuse me, what?" I blurted out. But the notary kept reading. Not a word about me. Not a single mention. When he finished, silence hung in the room. I felt blood pounding in my temples. "This must be a mistake," I said, looking from the notary to Elsa. "They couldn't have done that. I'm their son." The notary calmly shook his head. "There's no mistake. The will was drawn up 2 years ago, signed by both parents and notarized." I turned to Daniel. He sat with a perfectly impassive face, but the corners of his lips twitched, a barely noticeable smile. "Why?" I forced out. "Why did they do that?" Aunt Elsa sighed heavily. "Maybe because Daniel was always there," she said. "You lived in Berlin, came rarely, and he helped your mother every day, especially after Karl's death." I boiled over. "I helped too. I came when I could, sent money, supported them." "No one's arguing," the notary interjected gently. "But the decision was made this way. I have no right to discuss their motives." I wanted to scream that it was unfair, that it was betrayal, but the words stuck in my throat. After the official part, we went outside. I caught up to Daniel at the door. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked, holding back my rage. He shrugged. "I knew they appreciated me, but what was in the will, I only found out today." "Don't lie. You must have persuaded them, pushed them." He smirked. "You know, sometimes love can't be earned with diplomas and salaries. Sometimes people just need someone who's there." Those words burned me from the inside. He said it so calmly, as if it was my fault that I lived my own life, built a career, instead of sitting with my parents all day. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my rented apartment, staring at the wall, trying to understand. How could they do this? Yeah, I wasn't the perfect son. I didn't always call as often as I should have. Sometimes I argued with Mom. Sometimes I fought with Dad, but I loved them. I thought that was obvious. But it turned out that my whole life, I'd been competing for their attention with someone they ultimately chose over me. 100 questions swirled in my head. Maybe I really was too cold. Maybe they felt like I didn't need their support. Or did Daniel really convince them that he deserved it all? The more I thought, the more I tormented myself. A few days later, I scheduled a private meeting with the notary. I wanted to check, could the will be contested? Mr. Weiss listened calmly and dryly. "Formally, you can file a lawsuit," he said, "but the chances are slim. The will is properly drawn up. Medical reports confirm that at the time of signing, both were of sound mind." "But it's illogical," I exploded. "How can parents leave everything to a nephew and not mention their own son?" He shrugged. "The motives of the testators are not subject to legal evaluation." I left there feeling completely helpless. Aunt Elsa called me herself soon after. Her voice was soft, but there was steel in it. "I understand you're hurting," she said, "but maybe you should accept your parents' decision and not stir up a scandal." "So just accept that they erase me from their lives," I snapped. "No one erased you. You were important to them. But sometimes parents see things differently than we expect." I hung up. Every time I went back to this situation in my mind, I felt one thing: betrayal. I remembered childhood, how they held my hands, how Mom said, "You're the most important thing in our lives." And now those words seemed like a lie. They chose him. Not me, their son, but a stranger. And the worst part, I couldn't talk to them, couldn't ask, couldn't explain. All I had left were papers with stamps and the notary's signature. After the will was read, I felt like a stranger in my own family. Aunt Elsa called every couple of days, at first gently, then more harshly. "You need to let it go," she'd say. "Your parents decided this and it's their right." "Their right," I'd boil over. "What about my right to be their son?" She'd sigh in response. "You're a grown man. You have a job, an apartment, a future. It's harder for Daniel. He was always closer to them." Those words drove nails into my chest. I decided to consult a lawyer anyway. In Berlin, I had an acquaintance, Ms. Kramer. We met in her office. White walls, stacks of files, smell of coffee. "Formally, you can file a suit," she said. "But keep in mind, the trial will drag on for months, maybe years. The chances are low." "But it's absurd." I couldn't hold back. "How can parents leave everything to a nephew and not mention their own son?" She shrugged. "It happens. The law allows it. You have to decide, do you want to fight or accept it?" I left the office feeling like I was at a dead end. A couple of weeks later, I saw Daniel again. He invited me to a cafe in central Munich. I wanted to refuse at first, but curiosity won out. We sat at a table by the window. He ordered a latte and a croissant. I got black coffee. "Listen," he started, "I get that this is hard for you, but maybe we don't turn this into a war." "Are you serious?" I almost dropped my cup. "They left everything to you. You took the house, my childhood, the memories, and now you're suggesting no war." He looked at me calmly. "I didn't take anything. They decided it themselves. And you didn't push them, didn't persuade them." He smiled with the corner of his mouth. "I was just there. Maybe you should ask yourself why you weren't." That phrase hit harder than any punch. Nights I'd toss and turn without sleep. Daniel's words swirled in my head. "Maybe you should ask yourself why you weren't there." I remembered my student years, work, moves. Remembered how I didn't always answer Mom's calls. How I sometimes got irritated with Dad. How rarely I came home in recent years. Maybe I really am to blame. Maybe they felt me pulling away. But then the other side came. I loved them. Life just didn't allow me to be there all the time. Didn't they understand that? A month after the reading, I decided to go to my parents' house. I wanted to take at least personal things. Photo albums, books, Mom's jewelry. When I arrived, Daniel was already living there. He opened the door in a t-shirt and jeans like the owner. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Living," he replied calmly. "This is my house now. I need my parents' things. Photos, letters, Mom's jewelry." He shrugged. "Listen, that's part of the property now. But if you want, you can take a couple of photos." "A couple," I almost exploded. "These are my parents, this is my family." "Your parents left it to me," he said coldly. "So deal with it." I left, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. On the train back to Berlin, I stared out the window. Fields, villages, stations flashed by. And in my head, only one thought: they betrayed me. I felt like an orphan, even though I had parents for most of my life. But their decision crossed out everything. In Berlin, I met up with my old friend Lucas. We sat in a bar in Kreuzberg drinking beer. "Bro, I'd sue," he said. "Not for the money, but for justice." "But the chances are slim," I sighed, "and it'll drag on for years." "And if you let it go, can you live peacefully?" I thought about it and realized I didn't know the answer. The last straw was a call from Daniel. "Listen," he said, "I want to renovate the house, thinking of tearing down the old shed." I almost dropped the phone. The shed, that was my childhood place where Dad taught me to hold a hammer, where we built bird feeders together. If you do that, I said through gritted teeth, you're dead to me for good. He just smirked. The house is mine now. I hung up and realized I didn't want anything to do with him anymore. After the conversation about the shed, I walked around in a daze for days. It felt like the ground was pulled out from under me. The house where my childhood happened no longer belonged to me. Every item, every board, every scratch on the floor, now under Daniel's control. I pulled out the documents from the folder, printed a copy of the will, and laid it in front of me. I stared at those lines over and over, as if hoping the words would change. The lawyer said there was a tiny chance of winning. The trial would be long, expensive, painful. And even if I got a review, what would it change? Parents can't be brought back. On the other hand, if I let go, could I live peacefully? Wouldn't I remember every night that I let myself be erased from their lives? I decided anyway. In early spring, I gathered the documents and went to court. The process started. The first hearing was set for June, but even before that, the calls, letters, pressure began. Elsa wrote long messages. Think about it, you're dishonoring your parents' memory. They made a choice, and you're going against their will. Daniel sent cold texts. You just want to grab the money. Everyone knows it. I didn't respond, but inside I was boiling. I wasn't doing it for the money. I wanted to prove their decision was a mistake, that I mattered too. The first hearing lasted only an hour. Daniel's lawyer looked confident. Stack of papers, medical certificates, signatures. The testators were of sound mind, he repeated. The will was drawn up legally. My lawyer tried to push on the moral side, that excluding the only child is illogical and suggests pressure. But the judge remained cold. After the hearing, Daniel and I ran into each other in the hallway. You're going to lose anyway, he said, looking straight in my eyes, and end up with nothing. I didn't answer. Every day I asked myself the same question. Why am I doing this? Can I prove anything? Or am I just wasting energy and money, destroying what's left of the family? I caught myself starting to hate not just Daniel, but my parents too, for putting me in this situation, for making a choice I can't accept. That hatred scared me. Lucas dragged me to the bar again. You're driving yourself crazy, he said. You're not living anymore, just existing. But if I back down, it means they won, that they erased me. No, Lucas shook his head. It means you chose yourself. You only have one life and you're wasting it on a war with ghosts. Those words stuck deep. At the second hearing, I told my lawyer I wanted to withdraw the suit. He tried to talk me out of it for a long time, but I was firm. That day I felt relief, like I'd dropped a sack of rocks from my shoulders. I realized, no matter how much I fight, it won't bring my parents back. I can't change their decision, but I can change my life. I called him myself. I'm dropping the suit, I said. He paused, then said, smart decision. Don't think you won, I replied. I just don't want my life defined by your house or their will anymore. He smirked. We'll see. I hung up and realized that was our last conversation. Update a year later. A year has passed. I went to Italy, took a real vacation for the first time in years. Changed jobs, now I'm at a publishing house, working with books, which I dreamed about back in university. I don't talk to Daniel or my aunt. Sometimes I hear news through acquaintances. He renovated the house, tore down the shed, planted a new garden. Yeah, it hurts to hear, but it's not my life anymore. I still think about my parents. Sometimes I get angry at them. Sometimes I cry. But more often I remember the good moments. How Mom taught me to bake strudel, how Dad showed me how to fix a bike. Those memories are mine. No one can take them away. I realized inheritance isn't money or walls. It's the memory, experience, love that we carry inside. And even though the paper said everything went to Daniel, the real inheritance stayed with me.